My family ignored me for 32 years and paid my sister's $30K university. But when I bought my house in secret, they moved in without permission using a stolen key. I called the police and left them speechless. I'm 32 years old. I work in tech after getting my degree in computer science, and I need to get this story off my chest because what happened in the last few months basically made me cut contact with my entire family. I know how that sounds. Like it sounds super dramatic, and people always assume you're exaggerating when you say your family is toxic. But seriously, I don't have any other way to describe it. I guess I should start at the beginning. When I was a kid and my sister Michelle was literally the family princess, and I don't know, like the furniture that nobody notices until they need it. Michelle is 3 years older than me, so she's 35 now, and for as long as I can remember, she was always the favorite. And when I say favorite, I don't mean she got a little more attention. No. I mean we lived in completely different universes within the same house. When Michelle turned 15, my parents threw her a huge party. They hired a DJ, professional photographer, catering, custom balloon decorations, the whole show. They invited like 100 people. When I turned 15, my mom made a cake at home, and like 5 family members came over to eat pizza. And I remember that day thinking, well, maybe it's because Michelle is the oldest. Maybe when I get to her age, things will change. Spoiler alert, they never changed. In fact, they got worse. The thing is, my parents always had a different excuse to justify why Michelle got everything, and I basically got nothing. When we were kids, it was because Michelle needed more support because she was more sensitive, or because she had more friends and needed to maintain her social life, or whatever other made-up reason. Michelle got new clothes every season while I wore her hand-me-downs, or we bought things on sale. For Christmas, she'd get like 5 or 6 big gifts and I'd get 2 or 3 small things. And the worst part wasn't the material gifts. Honestly, the worst part was the attention. My parents went to all of Michelle's events. Every choir performance, every volleyball game, even if she was on the bench, everything. I was on the debate team and won a state tournament when I was 16, and my parents didn't go because that same day Michelle had dinner with her friends, and my mom wanted to help her get ready. Can you believe it? When it came time for college, that's when things got really unfair in a way they couldn't ignore or disguise anymore. Michelle wanted to go to a private university that cost like $30,000 a year. My parents paid for everything: full tuition, dorm, meals, books. They even bought her a used car so she could get around campus. She didn't have to work a single day during her 4 years of college. I, on the other hand, went to a state university that was much cheaper, but my parents told me I had to pay rent if I was going to keep living at home while studying. To rent, to my own family. I was 18 years old and working part-time at a coffee shop to be able to give them like $300 a month while going to school full-time. Michelle was living her best life at her expensive university without a care, while I was juggling work, classes, homework, and on top of that, paying to exist in the house where I grew up. And my parents never saw anything wrong with this. Every time I tried to talk to them about it, my mom would say things like, "Well, Taylor, Michelle has more expenses because she's away from home," or "Michelle needed that full college experience. You're more independent and you understand." There was always a reason, always an excuse. My dad basically just nodded along with whatever my mom said. He was never the type to defend anyone. He just went with the flow and let my mom make all the decisions about us. I think deep down he knew it was unfair, but he never had the guts to say anything. I graduated with a 3.9 gigapascals. Not to brag, but it was a huge achievement for me considering I was working and paying my own expenses. You know what my parents did to celebrate? They took me to dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant. Just the 4 of us, my mom, my dad, Michelle, and me. It was nice, I guess, but it was super simple. Michelle graduated 2 years before me with a 3.2 gigapascals, which is fine. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's definitely not as high as mine. For her, my parents threw a huge graduation party with catering, decorations. They invited all the extended family and friends. There were like 80 people in the backyard. I remember being there at that party thinking, seriously? Seriously, this is what she gets? And I only had a quiet dinner? But by that point, I was so used to being the second choice that I didn't even say anything. I just smiled and acted like everything was perfect. After graduating, I got a good job in tech. Nothing spectacular, but it pays well. And I moved into a small apartment. It was the first time in my life I felt like I had something that was completely mine. You know? A space. where nobody treated me like a second-class citizen. Michelle, on the other hand, married Andrew like a year after graduating. Andrew is, how do I say this without sounding too cruel? Basically a deadbeat. He's had like 5 different jobs in the last few years, and there's always some reason why he gets fired or quits. According to him, it's always someone else's fault. The boss was an idiot, the coworkers were incompetent, the schedule was impossible, always something. And Michelle never worked after getting married. She said she wanted to focus on being a full-time mom, which is fine. Everyone lives how they want. But the detail is they have 3 kids. Isabella is 5, Jacob is 4, and Wyatt is 2. And they basically live off Andrew's sporadic paychecks and constant help from my parents. My parents help them with everything. They pay their car insurance, buy them groceries often, give them money for rent when Andrew is out of work, watch the kids for free all the time. And again, if they want to help their daughter, that's fine, but they never offered me anything similar. When I moved to my apartment and was tight on money the first few months because I had to buy furniture and everything you need to start out, I asked them if they could lend me like $1,000 that I'd pay back in 3 months. My mom told me they didn't have extra money at that moment. 2 weeks later, I saw on Facebook that they bought Michelle a new living room set because hers was too worn out with the kids. The set cost like $2,500 according to what I saw in the post where my mom tagged the store. But of course, they didn't have $1,000 to lend me. Anyway, fast forward to like 8 months ago. I'd been renting for years and had been saving with the idea of eventually buying my own house. I didn't want anything big, just something small and comfortable that was mine, where I could paint the walls whatever color I wanted and have a little garden too, plant flowers. I started looking at houses online in my free time, went to see some properties on weekends, but I didn't tell my family anything because honestly, I didn't want to hear their opinions or have them try to get involved. Knowing my mom and Michelle, they probably would try to convince me to buy something near Michelle or something with extra space they could use. And I didn't want that at all. But here's where everything went to hell. I have a coworker, Kristen, who's super gossipy and doesn't know when to shut her mouth. I made the mistake of mentioning to her in passing that I was looking at houses because she'd asked what I did the previous weekend, and I told her I went to see some properties. I didn't think it was a big deal. Like it was just casual office conversation. Well, turns out Kristen lives in the same neighborhood as one of Michelle's friends, and one day, when they were at a kid's birthday party or something, Kristen mentioned, "Oh yeah, my coworker Taylor is looking for a house," and Michelle's friend obviously ran to tell Michelle, and Michelle immediately went to tell my mom. Suddenly, my phone started blowing up with messages from my mom and Michelle. My mom was sending me links to houses for sale, but not houses like the ones I was looking for. No. She was sending me huge 4 or 5 bedroom houses that cost like double my budget, and they were all in Michelle's neighborhood or maximum 10 minutes from there. The messages said things like, "Look at this one, Taylor. It has lots of space and it's close to your sister. It would be perfect." Or "This one has a finished basement that would be ideal for when Michelle and the kids come visit you." And I'd read these messages thinking, visit me? What is she talking about? Michelle barely visits me at my apartment because she says I live too far, which is ridiculous because I live like 25 minutes from her. Michelle called me super excited saying, "Oh my God, Taylor. Mom told me, you're looking for a house. How exciting. Let's go look at houses together this weekend." And I told her, "Michelle, thanks, but I already have plans to see houses alone. I prefer to do it at my own pace." And she got upset. Told me, "Don't be like that, Taylor. I'm your older sister. I want to help you make the right decision. Plus, I know the area much better than you." I told her I'd think about it, but I probably couldn't that weekend. She kept insisting for days, and my mom too. And finally, I had to tell them directly that I appreciated their interest, but I wanted to do this on my own. They didn't like that at all. My mom told me I was being selfish and that family should support each other in important decisions. Michelle told me I was being immature and that obviously I didn't know enough about real estate to do it alone. And I was like, seriously? I've been researching for months. I've seen like 20 houses. I've talked to real estate agents. I've reviewed my finances with an advisor. I'm not a kid who doesn't know what she's doing. But to them, I'll always be the little sister who doesn't know anything and needs to be guided. I decided right then that I was going to do this completely on my own and that I wasn't going to tell them anything until everything was finalized. I found a beautiful little house like 40 minutes from where Michelle lives, so in the opposite direction from where they wanted me to buy. It's a small cottage-style house with 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a renovated kitchen, and a perfect backyard. It's exactly what I wanted. Something cozy and manageable just for me. The price was within my budget, and the inspection came out fine. I did the whole offer, negotiation, and closing process without telling my family a word. It was super liberating. Honestly, doing something so important completely on my terms without anyone trying to insert their opinions or change my decisions. I closed on the purchase on a Tuesday afternoon. I signed all the papers, got the keys, and officially was the owner of my first house. I felt amazing. Like I felt I'd accomplished something huge completely on my own. I decided I'd tell my parents and Michelle that weekend at the family dinner we have every other Sunday. I wasn't going to hide that I'd bought a house. I just wanted to do it on my own terms and after the fact, when they couldn't give their opinion or try to change my decision. Sunday came and I went to my parents' house for dinner. Michelle and Andrew were there with the kids, as always. Dinner started normally. My mom had made roast chicken with vegetables. We were all sitting in the dining room. Michelle was talking about something with Isabella's school, I don't know, and my mom was super involved, asking questions and making comments. I was eating quietly, waiting for the right moment to drop the news. After a while, my mom asked me, "So, Taylor, how's the house hunt going? Did you go see any of the ones I sent you?" I took a deep breath and said, "Well, actually, I'm not looking for a house anymore, because I already bought one." I closed on Tuesday. There was such a heavy silence that I swear you could hear the wall clock ticking from the living room. My mom looked at me like processing what I'd just said, and then said, "What? What do you mean you already bought one? When?" And I said, "Well, on Tuesday." I just said it. I found a perfect house for me, made an offer, it passed inspection, and I closed on the purchase. Michelle immediately asked, "Where? Is it one of the ones Mom sent you?" I told her no, that it was in a different area. "How far from here?" she asked. I told her like 40 minutes, and that's when everything broke loose. Michelle went crazy, saying 40 minutes? Why so far? There are perfect options near me. Why would you buy something so far away? And I very calmly told her, because the house I bought is perfect for what I need, and it's in my budget. She continued, "But Taylor, didn't you think about how convenient it would be to be close? The kids could visit you more often. I could spend more time with you." Here I had to bite my tongue not to say something really rude, because Michelle has never made any effort to spend time with me. Every time I suggest we get together, she tells me she's too busy with the kids or doesn't have anyone to watch them. But when it comes to going out with her friends, suddenly my mom can watch the kids no problem. Instead, I just said, "Well, Michelle, this is my house and it's where I wanted it to be." My mom jumped in saying, "Taylor, how many bedrooms does it have?" I told her 2. "Only 2? And where are the kids going to sleep when they come stay?" And I was like, "Excuse me?" I said, "Mom, the kids aren't going to sleep over at my house. It's my house. It's not a family hotel." She got upset and said, "I can't believe you're being so selfish. We're family. We're supposed to be close and help each other." Michelle added, "Yeah, Taylor. Honestly, I don't understand why you kept this a secret from us and why you'd buy something without consulting us. This affects the whole family." And that's when I exploded. I didn't yell or anything, but I was very direct. I told them, "Look, this is my house that I bought with my money that I earned at my job. I didn't need to consult you because it's not your decision. I bought a house that works for me, for my life, for my budget. I didn't buy a house thinking about where Michelle's kids are going to sleep or how convenient it's going to be for you. I'm sorry if that sounds harsh, but it's the truth." My dad, who'd been quiet this whole time, said, "Taylor, don't talk to your mother like that." And I said, "Dad, with all due respect, you've made decisions my whole life that directly affected me without ever consulting me. You made me pay rent while Michelle had everything paid for. You gave me a quiet dinner when I graduated, while Michelle got a huge party. You told me you didn't have money to lend me when I needed it, but 2 weeks later you bought Michelle an expensive living room set. So sorry if I don't feel like I owe you consultation about my own house purchase." Michelle started crying, which is her typical tactic when something doesn't go her way, and said, "I can't believe you're bringing all that up now. You've always been so resentful of me." My mom hugged her and looked at me with so much anger and said, "Look what you did. Get out of my house right now." I got up, grabbed my purse, and said gladly, I left and heard Michelle crying louder and my mom telling her, "Don't worry, my love. She's always been like this, always jealous of you." I drove to my apartment with my hands shaking from anger and adrenaline. Part of me felt guilty, like that little voice in your head that tells you maybe you were too harsh, maybe you could have handled it better. But another part of me, the stronger part, was like, no, I'm done being the one who always gives in, the one who's always understanding, the one who always accepts being treated as less. To keep the family peace, the next few days were a nightmare of harassment. My phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls and messages from my mom, Michelle, and even Andrew, who had never messaged me in his life. My mom sent me long messages about how I'd broken Michelle's heart, about how it was my responsibility as the younger sister to be more considerate, about how the whole family was disappointed in me. Michelle sent me messages that alternated between playing victim, saying things like, "I never thought you hated me so much," and then aggressive messages saying, "You're selfish and you always have been." Andrew sent me a super weird message saying Michelle was devastated, and I should apologize. Like, who brought you into this, Andrew? They also started posting things on social media, not directly about me, but super obvious. Michelle posted something like, "It's sad when family doesn't support each other in important moments." My mom shared one of those cheesy, quote, images about family that I said something like, "Real family is there in good times and bad, not just when it's convenient." I knew it was directed at me, but I wasn't going to take the bait. I ignored everything for like a week until one Friday night. After I got off work, Michelle showed up at my apartment. I heard someone knocking on the door, and when I opened it, there she was with all 3 kids. Isabella and Jacob were standing there with their little backpacks, and Wyatt was in Michelle's arms. I froze, like, what's happening? And Michelle told me in this dramatic, pleading voice, "Taylor, please, I need to ask you for a huge favor. Andrew and I are in a difficult situation. We need to stay with you for a while we sort things out." I asked her what situation, what happened. She started saying that Andrew had lost another job, that they couldn't pay next month's rent, that the landlord was going to evict them, that my parents couldn't help them because they didn't have extra space. Everything sounded super suspicious because literally a week before everything was fine. I told her, "Michelle, you can't stay here. My apartment is too small. It barely fits my bed and my stuff." She insisted, saying, "The kids can sleep in the living room. Andrew and I can sleep in your room. You can sleep on the couch for a while. It won't be forever. Just until we get back on our feet." And that's when it clicked that this was all a plan. They thought that if Michelle showed up with the kids looking vulnerable, I was going to give in. Because how are you going to say no to your sister when she's with her children in a supposed crisis? But I was done with their manipulations. I told her very clearly, "Michelle, you can't stay here. If you're really in trouble, talk to mom and dad. Find other options. But my apartment is not one of those options." She started crying, saying, "But you're my sister. How can you be so cruel? The kids have nowhere to go." I told her I was sorry, but my answer was no. And I closed the door. I could hear her crying outside, saying, "Taylor, please, please," for like 5 minutes until she finally left. I felt horrible. Not for saying no, but because I know Michelle uses her kids as emotional weapons, and that's not okay. Those kids aren't to blame for any of this. The next day, I changed my phone number. I only gave the new number to my friends and people from work. I blocked my mom, Michelle, Andrew, and my dad on all social media. I needed peace and mental space to move into my new house without all this toxicity. I felt bad about having to go to that extreme, but I also felt enormous relief, like I could finally breathe without having to worry about the next manipulative message or the next ridiculous demand. I moved into my new little house over the next 2 weeks. I hired a moving company, packed everything myself, and didn't tell anyone in my family when moving day was or what my new address was. It was weird not having anyone from my family there for such an important moment, but honestly, it was better that way. Some friends from work came to help me unpack and organize things, and it was great having people there who were genuinely happy for me instead of people who were upset because they couldn't control my decision. Like 3 quiet weeks passed, where I didn't hear anything from my family. I was starting to believe they'd finally gotten the message and were going to leave me alone. But one Saturday morning, around 11, I heard someone knocking on my door. I looked out the window and it was my mom. I had no idea how she'd found my address, but there she was. I considered not opening, but I knew if I didn't open, she'd stay there knocking for hours because that's how she is. I opened the door and she immediately smiled, super fake, and said, Hi, honey. I brought apple pie. Your favorite. Can I come in? I knew this was a trap, that she was using the pie as an excuse to come in and probably give me a lecture or ask me for something. But I also knew that if I said no, she'd make a whole drama. I let her in with my guard way up. We went into the living room and she looked around saying, "Oh, Taylor, the house is cute. It's small, but it's cozy." She left the pie in the kitchen and then sat on my couch. She started with her mom's speech, saying she'd been very sad about our fight, that she only wanted what was best for me, that Michelle was devastated by how things had been left, that family shouldn't fight over these things. I just nodded without saying much, waiting for her to say what she really came to say. Finally, she got to the point. She said, "Taylor, I know you're upset with us, but I need you to understand that Michelle really is going through a difficult time. Andrew hasn't been able to get stable work. They're struggling to pay bills, and it would be amazing if you could help your sister." I asked her how I'm supposed to help. She said, "Well, you have this big house with 2 bedrooms, and you don't live with anyone. It would be perfect if Michelle, Andrew, and the kids could stay here for a while, maybe 6 months or a year, just until they get stable." I was like, "Are you kidding? This isn't a big house, Mom. It's 2 bedrooms. I use one as a bedroom and the other as an office to work from home. There's no room for 5 extra people. And besides, a year? You want me to become Michelle's halfway house for a year?" My mom got upset and said, "Don't be dramatic, Taylor. Family helps each other. You have the means to help and you're refusing because you're being selfish." I said, "Mom, I didn't buy this house so Michelle and her family could come live here. If they're having financial problems, they need to find other solutions. Maybe Andrew needs to look for work more actively. Maybe Michelle can look for a part-time job. There are options." My mom said Michelle can't work. She has to take care of the kids. I told her there are many moms who work and take care of kids, that there are daycares, that Andrew could stay with the kids, while Michelle works, that there are ways to make it work. She got up super upset and said, "I knew you were going to react like this. Always so cold and calculating, you never think about anyone but yourself." She grabbed her purse and walked toward the door. Before leaving, I asked her to leave me any spare keys she might have brought, because knowing my family, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to make a copy. She looked at me, offended, and said, "I don't have any keys to your house, Taylor. Do you think I'd steal your keys?" And I honestly didn't know whether to believe her, but I said, "Okay. I just wanted to make sure." She left very dramatically, slamming the door. 2 days later, on a Monday, I'd gone to work normally and left around 5 in the afternoon. I got to my house around 5:30, parked my car in the driveway, and when I was walking toward the front door, something felt weird. The door wasn't forced or anything, but when I opened it, all the lights were on and there was noise. Inside, my heart started beating super fast, thinking someone had broken in to rob. But then I heard Isabella's voice yelling, "Mommy, look, there's a garden." I went into my living room and couldn't believe what I was seeing. Michelle, Andrew, and all 3 kids were inside my house. There were suitcases in my living room, boxes with their stuff piled against the wall, the kids running around everywhere. Michelle saw me and smiled like everything is perfect and said, "Oh, Taylor, you got home early. We wanted to have everything organized before you arrived." We were starting to get settled. The kids are super excited to be here. I stood in the entrance of my own house in complete shock. I finally processed enough to say, "What are you doing here? How did you get in?" Michelle said Mom gave us her spare key. She told us you'd be happy to help us once you understood how much we need it. So my mom had taken my key, probably when she came with the pie. Surely, while I was distracted in the kitchen, she took my spare key that I had on the hook by the entrance. I told them they had to leave immediately, that this was trespassing, that they had no right to be here. Andrew for the first time spoke and said, "Taylor, don't be ridiculous. We're family. It's not trespassing." Michelle added, "We already packed all our stuff and left our apartment. We have nowhere else to go. You can't kick us out like this. Think of the kids." I grabbed my phone and called the police. Michelle yelled, "What are you doing? You can't call the police on your own family." And I said, "Watch me." I talked to the dispatcher and explained that there were people in my house without my permission, that they'd entered without my consent using a stolen key. They told me they were sending someone immediately. Michelle started crying, saying, "I can't believe you're doing this to us. Are you so horrible you're going to leave your nieces and nephews homeless?" Andrew was yelling at me that I was a heartless bitch. The kids were confused, and Jacob started crying because he felt the tension. I felt horrible for the kids. They weren't to blame for their parents' manipulative games, But I wasn't going to give in. This was my house, and they'd crossed a huge line. The police arrived in like 10 minutes. 2 officers. I explained the situation to them, that this was my house, that I was the only one on the title, that these people had entered without my permission using a key my mother had taken. I showed my ID with my name and address, showed documents from the house purchase. Michelle tried to explain to the officers that she was my sister, and that I'd told them they could stay, but that now I was changing my mind. One of the officers asked her, "Do you have anything in writing that says she gave you permission to be here?" Michelle said no, but it's family. We don't need papers. The officer said that legally this was private property, and if the owner was asking them to leave, they had to leave. They gave them the option to leave voluntarily or be escorted, and Andrew, seeing they had no choice, started taking their suitcases back out to the car while muttering curse words. Michelle was crying hysterically while they packed, saying things like, "You're going to regret this. Mom is going to know what you did. The family will never forgive you." The kids were confused and scared. Wyatt was crying in Andrew's arms. Isabella kept asking why they had to leave. It was horrible. Honestly, it was one of the hardest things I've had to do. But I knew if I gave in now, I'd never get rid of them. They left with the police making sure they actually left the property. After they left, one of the officers recommended I change all the locks immediately because they'd probably made copies of the key. He gave me the number of a locksmith who did emergencies. I called the locksmith and he told me he could come in like 2 hours. While I waited, I checked my whole house to see if they'd taken or moved anything. I found they'd put their stuff in my guest room, they'd used my bathroom, there were dirty dishes in the sink. It made me so angry to see how they'd assumed they could just take possession of my space. The locksmith arrived and changed all the locks, the front door, the back door, everything. It cost me like $300, but it was worth every penny. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept expecting someone to knock on the door or for Michelle to try to come back. Nothing happened, but my mind wouldn't stop. The next day, I went to see a lawyer. I explained the whole situation to him, from the lifelong favoritism to what had just happened with them trying to move in without my permission. The lawyer recommended sending a cease and desist letter to my mom, Michelle, and Andrew, basically telling them legally that they couldn't come near my property, that they couldn't contact me, and that any other attempt at harassment or unauthorized entry would result in legal action. I paid like $500 for the lawyer to draft and send the letters by certified mail. The letters were sent, and according to tracking, all 3 arrived and were received. My mom sent me like 10 emails from different addresses because I'd blocked her main email, all saying I was a terrible daughter, that how could I do this to my family, that I was going to regret breaking up the family. Michelle obviously couldn't call or text me because I'd changed my number, but I saw she tried to create fake Instagram accounts to message me. I'd block them every time a new one appeared. It was exhausting but necessary. It's been like 3 months since all that. I changed my number one more time just to be super sure. I adjusted all my privacy settings on social media, and I've basically become a ghost to my family. I don't know what they're doing now. I guess my parents kept helping Michelle like they always do. Sometimes I feel guilty. You know? Like that little voice that tells you, but it's your family. You should try to fix things. But then I remember everything that happened. A lifetime of being treated like second class. All the obvious favoritism. All the times my needs and feelings didn't matter. And I know I did the right thing. My house is my sanctuary now. I painted it the colors I wanted. Planted flowers in the garden like I dreamed. Bought furniture I like. It's small, but it's perfect for me. I have friends who come visit me. People from work who are genuinely happy for me. Last week, I organized a small dinner for some friends, and while we were all sitting in my garden eating and laughing, I realized this is the family I chose. People who value and respect me. And that's enough for me.